On my 60th birthday, my husband stood a young woman and a teenage boy next to me and told our guests, "This is my son, my legacy, the family I've been hiding for 30 years." My friends gasped in horror, but I simply smiled, handed him a velvet box and said, "I know, this gift is for you. Open it." He opened it, read the single paper inside, and his face turned pale white. The morning of my 60th birthday smelled of rain on hot asphalt and the sweet scent of the jasmine vines climbing my trellis. I woke up, as always, without an alarm, exactly at 6 o'clock. The light was gray and soft, filtering through the silk curtains. I love this time. The silence is heavy, full of potential, untouched by the disappointments of the day. In these moments, it feels like the house is breathing with me. I sat at the mahogany vanity that I bought with my first big paycheck 30 years ago and looked at my reflection. Every line on my face, every silver strand in my hair was earned. This house, this sprawling estate on the coast of California, was my sanctuary. A long time ago, in another life, I was a young, ambitious neurosurgeon. I had the world at my feet, a career that demanded hands of steel and a heart of gold. I remember the smell of the hospital corridors, the adrenaline of the operating room. Then came Richard. He was charming, a visionary real estate developer who promised to build empires. But his empires were made of sand. He had big dreams but empty pockets. I made a choice. I supported us. I worked double shifts, missed holidays, and funded his projects that always seemed to fail. While his businesses crashed and burned, I climbed the ladder. I became the chief of surgery. I bought this land, I built this house. It became my quiet masterpiece, the physical proof of my blood, sweat, and tears. "Martha, have you seen my gold cufflinks? The ones I wore to the gala?" My husband's voice yanked me from my memories. Richard stood in the doorway, adjusting his silk tie, frowning at his reflection. Not a word about my birthday. Not a single glance at the dress I had laid out. 60 years old, 35 years together. For him, this was just another day to show off. "Check the top drawer, Richard. I polished them yesterday," I replied calmly, applying my lipstick. I knew he wouldn't notice the effort. He stopped noticing me decades ago. To him, I was just the bank, the ATM, the silent partner who signed the checks. "You are my rock, Martha," he would say when he needed money for a new venture. He had no idea how hard a rock could be when it was thrown. The phone rang. It was my daughter, Sarah. "Hey, Mom, happy birthday. Look, we're running late. Traffic is a nightmare. Make sure the caterers don't put the shrimp out too early, okay? We need everything perfect for Dad's announcement." She spoke quickly, annoyed. My birthday wasn't a celebration of my life. It was a backdrop for whatever announcement Richard had planned. "It's fine, Sarah. Everything is under control." I hung up. There was no pain, just a cold, clinical detachment. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the house was full. Guests, colleagues, and Richard's business associates filled the garden, drinking my expensive wine and eating the food I paid for. I played my part, the gracious hostess, the supportive wife, a role I had perfected over decades. Richard was in his element. He moved through the crowd, laughing, boasting. "My estate," he said to a group of investors, "my design." No one corrected him. No one knew that the deed to this house, the cars, the investments, everything was in my name. My father, a wise judge, had insisted on a prenuptial agreement and separate finances all those years ago. It was my secret weapon. My niece, Emily, arrived. She was the only one who hugged me tightly. "Aunt Martha, are you okay? You look different today." "I'm fine, honey," I smiled. "I'm just ready." Emily squeezed my hand. She had always seen through Richard's charm. She knew he was a leech. Then, the moment came. Richard tapped his champagne glass with a spoon. The garden went silent. He stood on the raised patio looking handsome and arrogant. "Friends, family," he began, his voice booming. "Today we celebrate Martha. But today I also want to share a truth I've held inside for too long." He gestured to the side gate. A woman walked in. She was younger, perhaps in her late 40s, dressed in a flashy red dress. Next to her was a teenage boy looking awkward and sullen. I recognized her, Linda, his secretary for the last 20 years. Richard walked over and put his arm around them. "For 30 years, I have lived with a heavy heart," Richard announced, looking at the crowd with fake tears in his eyes. "Martha and we could never have a son, a legacy, but God works in mysterious ways. This is Linda, and this is Jason, my son." The crowd gasped. My daughter Sarah dropped her glass. "I hid them to protect Martha's feelings." Richard continued, lying through his teeth. "But I can't live a lie anymore. I want my son to take his rightful place in this family, in this house." He looked at me, expecting me to crumble. He expected the old Martha, the one who would cry, who would beg, who would forgive him to avoid a scene. But in that moment, I didn't feel the ground vanish. I felt a click, like a scalpel making the first precise cut. The thought was not loud. It was quiet and clear. He fell for the trap. I stood there, looking at the man I had supported for decades, presenting another woman's child as his legacy. The irony was delicious. I slowly turned my head and smiled, not bitterly, but with the terrifying calmness of a surgeon about to operate. I walked over to the gift table where a single small black velvet box sat. I had placed it there this morning. I picked it up. It was light. I walked up the stairs to the patio. Richard looked confused. "Martha," he whispered off mic. "Thank you for your honesty, Richard," I said into the microphone, my voice steady. "I knew. This gift is for you." I held out the box. He hesitated. This wasn't in his script. He took the box, his hands trembling slightly. He probably thought it was a key to a new car, or maybe a watch, a peace offering. He opened it. Inside was not jewelry. It was a single folded piece of yellowed paper. He unfolded it. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I knew every word on that paper. It was a medical report from 1990. Patient, Richard Blackwood. Diagnosis, orchitis-induced azoospermia. Condition, sterile. Sperm count, 0. His hands began to shake violently. The paper rattled. He looked up at me, his face draining of all color. The arrogance was gone. In its place was pure animal fear. He looked at the boy, Jason, then at Linda. "Read it, Richard," I whispered, just loud enough for the microphone to catch. He couldn't speak. "It's a fertility report," I announced to the stunned crowd. "From 30 years ago. Richard, you are sterile? You have been sterile since 1990. Biologically, it is impossible for you to have a son." The silence was deafening. Linda, the mistress, let out a small gasp. She knew exactly what that meant. She'd been lying to him for decades, letting him pay for her life, her house, her son's education, all on the lie that the boy was his. You knew?" Richard choked out. "I knew," I replied coldly. "I knew when you came home smelling of her perfume 20 years ago. I knew when you started withdrawing cash from our joint account, and I knew when she told you she was pregnant. Why didn't you tell me?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Because I wanted to see how much you would pay for a lie," I said. You spent millions on them, Richard. Millions of my money that I let you take, and it was all for a stranger's child." Linda tried to run. She grabbed the boy's hand. "Come on, Jason, let's go." "Wait!" Richard yelled, turning on her. "Is it true? Is he mine?" Linda looked at him with disgust. The game was up. "You were an easy mark, Richard. You wanted a legacy so bad, you didn't even ask for a blood test." She dragged the boy away, leaving Richard standing alone on the stage, holding the paper that proved he was not a father, not a patriarch, but a fool. I turned to my niece, Emily. "It's time." Emily nodded. She handed me a second envelope. I placed it on the table next to Richard. "That," I said, "is the eviction notice. This house is in my name. The accounts are in my name. And since you just admitted to 30 years of infidelity in front of 100 witnesses, my lawyers tell me the divorce will be very efficient." I turned and walked toward the house. I didn't run. I walked with the dignity of a woman who had just cut out a tumor. Guests parted for me. No one spoke. Behind me, I heard Richard shouting my name, but his voice sounded small, drowned out by the crashing waves of his own destruction. Emily and I went inside and locked the glass doors. We watched as the party disintegrated. Guests hurried to their cars. Linda and the boy were gone. Richard was left sitting on the patio steps, head in his hands, utterly alone. That night, my phone buzzed, a voicemail from Richard. I played it on speaker. "Martha, please, we can fix this. Linda tricked me. I'm the victim here. You can't throw me out. I'm an old man. Where will I go?" His voice was pathetic. He wasn't sorry for betraying me. He was sorry he got caught. He was sorry the free ride was over. I didn't reply. I deleted the message. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. "It gets worse for him," Mr. Henderson said, opening a file. "We found out that Richard took out loans in your name to pay for that boy's college tuition. That's fraud, Martha." "Press charges," I said, "for everything." "Are you sure?" "He tried to replace me," I said, looking out the window at the city's skyline. "He tried to bring his mistress into my home on my birthday. I want him left with nothing but the shirt on his back." 3 days later, Richard tried to ambush me at the grocery store. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes. "Martha!" He grabbed my cart. "You have to stop this. The police are asking questions about the loans. I could go to jail." I looked at him. I remembered the man I loved 30 years ago. That man was dead. "You should have thought about that before you introduced your son to the world," I said calmly. "I did it for us," he lied, desperate. "I wanted a family for us." "No, Richard, you did it for your ego, and now your ego is the only thing you have left to keep you warm." I pushed my cart past him and got into my car. I didn't look back. 6 months have passed. The divorce was finalized last week. I got everything. The house, the investments, the pension. Richard is living in a small motel on the outskirts of town, working part-time at a hardware store. Linda left him the moment the money dried up. The boy, Jason, wants nothing to do with him. I sold the big estate. It was too big for one person, and it held too many memories of a lie. I bought a penthouse in the city with a view of the ocean. Now, my days are my own. I've gone back to playing the piano, something I gave up years ago to support Richard's business meetings. I sit at my Steinway looking out at the sunset and I play. The music fills the room, replacing the silence of a loveless marriage. This morning, I woke up early. I brewed a cup of tea and stood on my balcony. The air smelled of salt and freedom. For 30 years, I was the foundation for a man who didn't appreciate the ground he walked on. I carried his secrets, his failures, and his lies. But a foundation is only useful if the house standing on it is sound. When the house is rotten, you have to tear it down. I took a sip of tea. At 60, my life has just begun. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched you, please hit the like button. And write in the comments, I would have opened the box. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. See you in the next life story with love and respect.